Okay, hello everybody. Welcome back to another Taj Tuesday. Having some video through it. Last week's discussion that I had with the Mayor of Connecticut and other Hamden leaders, we had a lot of positive feedback from that conversation, which was great. And I apologize to some of those that didn't get their questions answered during the conversation. I did see the mayor going in and answering comments, so hopefully you did get your questions answered. But moving on to the keeping the same topic and same energy as last week, I brought in my guest today, Rudy, and here to talk to us this week about the talk. And the talk is right now it's difficult for a lot of parents out there, and I moving find a way to navigate our kids through all the confusion. Right? It's a lot of stuff. You know, it's out on the streets, it's on TV, it's a topic of everybody's conversation, and sometimes parents find it hard to have that conversation about race with their kids. And today we have two beautiful couples that came in to help us and use their share with us their expertise on having the talk with our children. And I just want to thank Eric Bailey today and Rudy Burgess. Rudy actually had a chance to come by the Ring of Honor induction, and we had a good time there. And Eric, I just saw you on Good Morning America the other day, and you had some great pointers for everybody. And I just want to go ahead and open the floor up to you guys. You know, just go ahead and give us the advice. How would you bring the conversation up, the big talk?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's important to understand is that Black families all over the country are having the talk with their kids, you know, at various stages, various ages. And a lot of folks don't know about it. You know, when a lot of white families, talk about the talk, it's about purity. You know, it's a totally different conversation. And the talk that we've had with our children and my dad had with me and his dad, it's about how to survive in a world where people might be afraid of you just because you're darker than them. And that's something that is difficult to navigate because there's no template. No one teaches you how to have the talk. You just have to figure out what's right for your kids at the time. And for us, our oldest, we have a 12-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 7-year-old, and our oldest has already been called the N-word on 4 occasions, twice at school and twice out on public streets. And we had to prepare him for that, but couldn't quite prepare anyone for that. And then we wanted to kind of embrace him and say, don't worry, this will never happen again. But it did happen again and again and again. And this idea of the talk, it's an ever evolving conversation, at least in our family, of, you know, how old are you? What are you likely to run into next? And here's some things that some tools you can use to navigate the world.
Yeah, and I agree. I think, you know, it's pretty much based on the age of the child because, you know, I have a 2-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son. And I remember having to talk with my family, you know, differently in high school compared to what it was like in college. So, you know, I think you just need to make sure that your kids are of age and mature, and depending on where they are in, you know, in life, you know, you're preparing them for tools and, you know, situations that they can navigate through. And like for my son Maddox, who's 7, I don't need to talk to him about getting pulled over right now. You know, I need to talk to him about knowing the difference between right and wrong, knowing about situations and how to handle them, and, you know, being able to recognize when he's in, you know, an uncomfortable situation, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, I definitely think it's important, time and place, right? Like you guys both touched on. I find myself trying to, you know, just find certain situations where I find that, you know, she's showing interest, you know, like the other day, you know, the protests going on, and, you know, we watching the news and seeing what happened Scottsdale Fashion Square Mall, and they're seeing the videos, and she's like, "Oh, Dad, is that all George's friends?" And I was like, "In a way, sweetie, yes. Yes. Those are his friends. There's people. There are people out there standing up for him. He passed away. It's just a horrible story. But then trying to talk to her about the whole death and dying thing as well. Zoe's turning 6, this month, and she's had a hamster pass away, but it happened to be lost. It ran away. You know what I mean? So avoid the whole thing. This situation actually, when she was talking about the friends, it gave me an opportunity to go ahead and explain more about the situation, and it just opened up the conversation. Pretty much what I'm trying to get to. Definitely work. Feel bad. No child should have to go through what your kids going through with getting called N-word and things like that. It's I've had experiences with it myself. Actually, being a biracial kid myself, so it was like I wasn't black friends, and then some white people just didn't want nothing to do with me. I remember I went to Eudora, Arkansas for summer. It's crazy, like all the time, and I'm like, bro, back at home, that's not what they call me. It's big. This so man, it's just it's a big. There's so many different angles to it, and I think what you guys are doing, as far as the walk this weekend. I mean, it's gonna be a conversation starter for even more things that we can talk about. It's gonna be another gateway for me to talk to her about certain things, and I'm sure we will when we're out there, and she'll understand a lot more. And that's the point, right? We want to try to educate the future, right?
Right. One thing our daughter asked us. We watched the CNN Sesame Street town hall on racism and Black Lives Matter, and we had some great conversations after that with our kids. Questions popping up for hours. One here, and then an hour later, another one pop up. And at one point, our youngest, Jasmine, she's 7, and she came up to us and she said, "So I don't understand why all these protests are happening just because of one man. Is that like why did one man cause all of these things?" And it was a very pure child question. And it's like, oh, because we have all of this extra context and understanding that we know about, that we understand this is not just a one thing. This is centuries worth of pain coming out. And it just opened up this really powerful conversation in our family where we're talking about, well, how we've had these conversations? Well, here's the conversations that we've had for generations. And we tried to explain inequity. And we started talking about, when GIs came home from World War II, the white soldiers got the GI Bill and 0% mortgages, and the black soldiers did not. And it's like, from that point going forward, there's a huge disparity financially that can be passed down from generation. It's like, how do you explain that to a kid? We talked about job applications and how if the applicant has a black sounding name versus a white sounding name and everything else is exactly the same, the white applicant will get called back 5 times more frequently. And it's like, those are all kind of the underlying contextual things that are kind of sparking this current movement. It's not just George Floyd. Mm-hmm. We are absolutely sad, mad, and frustrated and angry about George Floyd and his death and all of the others that have been caught on camera and not. But also it's all of these other things that just make it unfair to race, head to head with some other people.
Yeah, I saw a video that really touched me on YouTube. It was a group of teens, and it looked like a coach. And the coach had a whole list of questions, right? And the questions, if you never had to worry about paying a bill, take a step forward. You know, if you never had to worry about, you know, not having a cell phone to make a phone call, take a step forward. You know, if you have both parents in your house, like, and you know, they went through the whole process, and everybody took the steps, and you know, afterwards he gave everybody the picture. He's like, this is the head start that you guys have on life, right? Compared to the guys in the back, you know, who would, if it was just a regular race, guarantee they would smoke everybody in the race. You know what I mean? But it's been happening all these years, but it is good to see. I feel like this time around, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's just me, you know, but I like to get excited, but I feel like it's different this time. You know, I'm seeing friends that never talked about stuff that are now having conversations.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, you know, and is educating people, you know, getting those who don't understand, who, I mean, sad that it's taken this long and this type of movement to find interest, you know, and, you know, it's crazy to say, but people's opinions are changed and swayed based off of posts that they're seeing because they had no clue. So it's opening up the eyes to those who maybe were just kind of had an idea, but now it's like, wow, I see the big picture. So, you know, you can read one, you know, that's going to be what we have to do as a society to, you know, get to where we want to be as far as equality, you know, because if everyone's out there uneducated, we're going to continue to hit the same cycle after cycle. So.
Sorry, but yeah, that is correct. Just got sidetracked for a second, but moving on, you know, and thinking forward, you know, I think definitely with the younger, like, you know, I see a lot of teenagers out there, you know, that want to see change. I also see, you know, like even my daughter, like, you know, like our kids, right? And that's the future. You know, if we reach enough people, you know what I mean, they can go ahead and pass that message along to their kids, and maybe someone who didn't think it was a big deal 3 months ago, you know, finally sees that, you know, maybe it's a big deal now. Well, maybe we should have this conversation. And you know, and I appreciate you guys coming on to again give that advice to the parents that are having that trouble with the conversation.
Yeah, one of the things that we see is this idea we kind of came up with called the edge of sympathy. And so there's a lot of people kind of riding that line where they can either fall into being sympathetic or fall the other way and be apathetic and just not care. And there's so many people along that line. What we're noticing is there's this kind of big counter movement of folks trying to get people to not care, to disengage. Like people who are saying, no, all lives matter, or people who are saying protests are dangerous, or people who are saying, you know, like all of these things to get people who are on the edge to say, yeah, maybe I don't need to step in right now. And that's really dangerous, because the way that change happens in our country is that we get enough voters to say this matters, and then the people we vote for say, yeah, you know what, that matters. And then they go and change policy. And so if we can get that momentum rolling, then we can start to make those systemic changes. But if we lose all those people who are on the edge of caring, the edge of sympathy, then they, whoever they is trying to slow us down, they will have won.
Well, and I know that's a really good point, because I know that we talked earlier, I have somebody very close in my circle is on the other side, very all lives matter, and posted and felt like that's what they needed to do, and they were done. It wasn't their fight. It took me blasting just post after post after post, trying to get as many people on social media just to kind of see from our perspective as a biracial family, you know, and she ended up calling. We talked for over an hour. She had questions like, you know, I don't want to offend you. And Rudy had to really step in and be like, it's not offensive that you're asking and educating. And it kind of clicked. So we've had, you know, 4 or 5 people, and it kind of clicked, but it was like, okay, I get it now. But then it was very big on, okay, well, if you make your post, don't let it just be that one time. It's got to, now you're in it.
Yeah, and there's, unfortunately, there's people out there that are taking advantage of the situation, hopping out of cars, taking pictures, doing all kind of absurd things. But I mean, even if that's what they're doing, if they're posting that to 1,000 people and they're saying, oh, well, she's helping, maybe I go do my part, then, it's take it for what it's worth, right? Rudy, who do we have right there? You want to make an introduction?
Yeah, this is little Zoe. This is my little
This is our Zoe.
time. Yeah.
Hi, Zoe.
See the attitude.
Yeah.
Rudy, do you want to share with us, a little bit about yourself and the importance of having the talk? Just go over, really what it means to you. I know you touched a little bit on it earlier, but if you could share more, like,
Yeah. So I mean, I'm from a military background, so I grew up traveling around the country with my dad overseas and stuff like that, and I never really had to talk until I was getting ready for college, and it was important because my dad always told me, the way that you carry yourself is important because you never know what situation you might be. You don't want to be, mistakenly identified for someone who you're not, so he's always telling me, watch how you wear your hair. You don't want to be out there with tattoos, do that. So, he let me know that it's dangerous. That, I don't feel that, you got to change your style, but that's just one of the factors that was important to me. But, and growing up on an Air Force base, you don't really see that much crime. So I guess you could say sheltered, but after that, it was a different story. So after moving off of the base and, now I'm getting ready to go to college, I can remember a time when my brother was just in front of our house. And, back in the day, it was cool to have speakers and, up in the back. So he had just bought this new BMW and he was putting these speakers in the back. And the lady walking down the street actually called the cops on him because he looked like he was taking merchandise out of the vehicle, And sure enough, within a couple minutes, couple hours, the police were knocking at our door and, lights and stuff like that. And, that's just an example of, looking a certain way and you're just in front of your house and the cops coming, So, I think it's important just to find yourself so that way you're not in these situations to, how to handle yourself. Because at any time he could have got crazy, he could have, started an altercation and who knows what could have happened.
Yeah.
So it's always about protecting yourself and like you said, having these little tools in your belt, how to handle yourself in situations is basically going to save our lives,
Yeah. And I think that's the thing is that, as Black men, we've had to learn those tools and consider, if I'm really mad that someone is falsely accusing me of something, am I allowed to get mad? Because then I'm a mad Black man, and which is extra threatening to people. And so we've learned to kind of moderate our own emotions and sometimes just not being true to how we really feel. I mean, there was a situation we were just actually talking with the kids about. We were at Costco and our oldest, he was what, maybe 8?
Yeah, well, I think he was like 7.
Right.
And he was on Heelys, rolling around through the aisles and whatnot. So he was with us hanging out, but he was following behind a little bit. So we had some space to roll around through the store. And this woman didn't like what she saw, didn't appreciate it. And so we had just turned the corner and our son was coming down the end of the aisle. And this woman just went off on him. I mean, like, just yelling, screaming, this big, huge ordeal. And so, all these people kind of come over and I call Eric over. Well, it was in the winter time. So he's wearing a hoodie, his hood's not up, but he's wearing a hoodie and sweatpants and he's dressed for comfort and warmth. And this woman reacted like Eric was going to kill her. And he was just telling her, like, that's my son. You don't talk to her like that. He was firm, he was stern, but he wasn't, yelling the way that she was. And she reacted like this victim of like, this guy's going to hurt me in the middle of Costco. And there's all these people around there like, no, you're the one that instigated all of this. You're the one who's attacking, a 7-year-old boy. And it was this whole thing. And afterwards on the drive home, I remember Eric was beating himself up and he was like, had I come straight from work, he wears a 3-piece suit, he's dressed every day for work. He's like, had I come from work, I wonder what her reaction would have been as opposed to me going home and getting comfortable first and then having this interaction together.
And also like how quickly that could have gone bad.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if someone listened to her instead of observing what actually happened, you know, it could have gone really bad.
Yeah.
You know, people have open carry and concealed carry,
Yeah.
you know, like, and that's one of the things, like, I remember thinking about it afterwards, like, as we're kind of doing all this processing, it's like, maybe I shouldn't have done that. It's like, no, I want to protect my son and allow him to be free as a child and have fun. But at the same time, you know, it's like all these extra considerations that a lot of folks don't have to do. Like, they don't have to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, thinking, we do a lot of research on brain science, and there's this idea of kind of cognitive load and the things that we have to think about kind of occupy our cognitive capabilities. And when we have to consider extra things, we have less cognitive ability for the normal things.
Mm-hmm.
And so while we're sitting there thinking, should I, shouldn't I, how do I modulate? What level should I, what do I need to wear to be, all those extra considerations mean we have less ability to think through a normal problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so when people say, you know, we got to be better, faster, stronger to achieve the same thing, well, that's why.
Yeah.
It's because we have to put in so much extra effort just to achieve normalcy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that a lot of people don't consider. And I think the beauty of this conversation is a lot of folks are saying, really? You think about that? You talk to your kids about that? And they're like, oh, well, maybe if you guys are talking to your kids about that sort of thing, maybe we can talk to our kids about something related, or talk to our kids about your kids having to have this talk. And that's a really cool
thing.
Get
that empathy going for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Just with you, when you were saying with the whole how you dress and everything with Rudy, it's when he's playing, Taj's probably the same way. You know, when you were playing, everybody's cheering for you on the field. They don't know really what you look like without your helmet on, right? So in college, especially, Rudy would be out there. Everybody's cheering for Rudy. We leave and he's in his ASU issued sweatpants and whatever, but now he has his helmet off, and you see a biracial couple enter a gas station, and the very same people that were just cheering him on and are looking at him and holding their purses a little tight because he doesn't announce who he is when he walks in.
Right.
You shouldn't have to, you know, and people don't get that aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there's I believe with the dressing, that the term for that they used to have for was peacocking. It's like when you have to wear your Sunday best, you know, and just for like an acceptance. Like, it's unfortunate that, you know, you would even have that feeling. You know, if I had my suit on, I wonder if it would have went a different way. Like, look, it's a messed up world to live in. But like you said, those are the kind of thoughts that go through our head. I took Zoe to a park, you know, up here in North Scottsdale, and the park was full of kids, and I was like, yes. I was like, you know, kids, go play, have a good time. And we were there maybe like 5 minutes, and then like the group, there was like 4 or 5 moms with all the kids. They took all the kids and moved them to the tennis court for I don't even know. They were like running back and forth to the car to get toys for them to play with. Some kids didn't want to go to the tennis court. And, you know, I'm asking that, I had the same question. I went there, I had on a Raiders hat, you know, just some mesh shorts.
Oh, it's probably because the Raiders hat.
Maybe, you know what? The thoughts that, I mean, I have thoughts go through my head all the time. It's like, you know, well, maybe they're looking at me because, you know, I'm so big, you know, or, you know, maybe they did. I don't know. I find myself trying to make excuses for them.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yes.
Like, you know, it's crazy that, you know, like you said, the thoughts that we have. And, you know, I try to tell.
I can agree with you, Taj, on that part where you're staying at the park. I mean, I've been in a similar situation where, you know, you saw the skin tone of my daughter compared to my skin tone. You know, she has pretty fair skin. So you can imagine when I take her to park and my son to the park and they're kicking and screaming, not wanting to leave the park. And now I got to scoop them up and they're kicking me and they're, you know, saying I don't want to go. That's, you know, people looking at me crazy the same way, you know, so.
He's stealing a child.
Yeah.
You know?
People are, you know, are you okay? Are you his daddy? Asking me, you know, who is this guy? Like, come on. Like,
and so it's, you know, blonde hair and blue eyes, and people see us out in public and we get a double take a lot. You know, they wonder. I'm sure they do. I'm sure they want to ask questions.
Oh yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
and it is what it is.
And it's hard when they do ask questions.
Yeah.
Just Maddox's football team last year, we had a woman who was like, your stepdad or is so great to you. Maddox like, what is she talking about?
Yeah.
It's like some people, they don't understand like things that you say to kids, because he was like, what is a stepdad? I was like, that's another conversation. What do you say to that?
Yeah.
Our son is going through like an identity crisis. He wants the dreads and it's just how it is. You can't.
Then you also got to explain to him, like, again, Maddox is asking the questions of, are the police bad? You got to explain to him there are some bad cops and there's some good cops, because you don't want your kids to think, okay, the police are bad and, we don't want to call upon them. Well, I mean, we have family who, are in law enforcement. So you want to make sure that they have an understanding of what's right and what's wrong, and an experience that I had with my son when he was only 5 that came up is we went to an ASU football game, and they have the radars or the metal detectors there, and you got to walk through them every game. And we walked through, we're going through line, and just so happened they pull me out to the side with my son, and they have to wand search me, and I don't know, it could be the count or however many people you wand search, but at the time
Here you are making excuses, just like Taj said, right? You're giving them all the excuses
to justify it, like, okay, you know what? It is what it is. Mm-hmm. And then my son, after he gets done searching me, patting me down and everything, he goes by, we walk up to our seats, and, I had to hold back tears because he asked me, Dad, did he think you were a bad guy? And my son at 5 years old is now looking at the police like, oh, I'm a bad guy, you know what I mean? So thinking that the police think his own father's a bad guy. So again, you got to be able to explain to them what's going on in the media, and also, the difference. So,
yeah, one thing I think a lot about is so I study brain science and psychology because I'm a nerd and that's what I do. But I came across this study from the American Psychological Association. So it's not some random study. It's actually a series of 6 studies that they did, and in a bunch of different ways they tested to see how people perceive Black men compared to white men. So they got Black men and white men of same stature, same size, same build, same height, weight, everything. And they showed the images, and then they said, I want you to rate how tall you think they were, how much they weighed, how threatening you think that they were, how much of a danger. And in every case, the Black man was perceived as bigger, stronger, and more threatening. In every case, in all 6 different studies, they did a whole bunch of different ways. And that's just something that is, I don't know, chicken or egg. Well, we have the stereotype that Black men are big guys. Mm-hmm. And so then that stereotype feeds the perception of what people see. And so they see that, which feeds the stereotype, right? And it kind of keeps going around. And
that happened with Tamir Rice, though.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know that he was this young kid and anything like that. And when they gave all the descriptions in the report, and then you get out his actual height and weight, and it was drastically different than what was originally reported.
Yeah, but he was a man child. But no, he was a kid. Yeah. He was a kid. And if you rewatch rewatch all the news compilations of Eric Garner, it's like everyone's like, he's a monster. He's a monster. There was one image of a short cop next to him, and he was a good, I don't know, maybe 8 inches taller than this one cop. But the cop right behind him was the same height. Yeah. Not to mention the 4 other cops, right? And it's like it just feeds this idea. And so what I think, like, how do we get past this? How do we overcome this? Well, we need more people to have more contact with different kinds of people. Mm-hmm. And I think that the beauty of this children's march is right now, children just see the world as the world is. Mm-hmm. There are differences of color, but everyone's a human, right? And they can see that. And if we just keep reinforcing that we are all of the human race, yes, we look different. Yes, we live in different kinds of houses. Yes, we do this, do that. But because I'm darker, just because I'm Black, doesn't mean I'm big and scary. Doesn't mean that I'm a threat to your family. Doesn't mean that I'm stealing my children as I put them in the car, right? And I think that we need to continue this conversation with the kids and also the parents, right? So that people can start changing those perceptions and kind of breaking that cycle.
Thank you. Thank you. Just real quick, I want to go into the Kids Walk for a Change this weekend before I start filtering these questions in from live. You just guys want to just go ahead and give us a brief explanation of what it is, the time, location, everything?
Yeah, so the march is this Saturday, 10 a.m. It's going to be in the plaza just east of the Calvin C. Good Municipal Building. And it's a really great location, actually. Calvin C. Good was the first Black council member here in the city of Phoenix. And right across on the other side of the plaza, you've got the police museum. So it's kind of this perfectly affixed place to get things kicked off and started. We're going to do a really quick, brief rally. All messages are going to be directed, to the kids level, speaking directly to the kids. So that their attention is there. And then we're going to go ahead and do the march. It's a 1 mile march. That's all blocked off and secured route. And when we get back to the start line, where we started off at, families can disperse from there. So it's going to be really great. Talking about race, talking about racism. There's going to be a speaker there who's going to help the kids take a pledge to stand up to racism and, using love and kindness and, helping them continue those conversations with their peers once we get back into school and things like that.
Thank you very much, Jamie. And it's, it's something I'm looking forward to. I've already been hearing about it, and, I'll be there. To everyone that just heard about it, this Saturday, 10 a.m., Kids Walk for a Change, come join us. It'll be a good time, and it'll also be educational. So come on out.
I think real quick, in fact, jump in real quick. I think this whole thing has been so beautiful because we didn't know the Burgesses until 2 days ago.
Yeah. We've never met. This is the first time we've seen each other, other than a picture.
And Jamie and I were talking about starting a children's march for coming Saturday. And I get a Facebook group invite from a woman I used to work with saying, hey, there's a children's walk group that was just started. Like the same day, we came up with the same idea and connected, and with the powers combined, it's been fantastic to watch this thing really take shape, and folks from all over the state are wanting to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Nice. Rudy, you want to touch on it as well?
Yeah, I think it's going to be great for the kids. There's going to be a lot of people there who can, kind of tell from their experiences, and it's going to be kids kind of get together and see that there's other kids, standing up for, something that we all think is right. So, who knows where this can go from here.
Right.
Directly, like I said, there'll be a lot of conversations getting sparked there. Amongst all the kids there, and friends being made, and hopefully all this stuff will carry over, and that message will carry on for the ages for sure. So we have here some of the questions coming from the Facebook comments, and I'll just go ahead and open them up for any one of you want to go ahead and answer. So the first question is, what is the right age to start talking about race without jeopardizing the children's innocence?
Oh, well, I'll say, since I have a 7-year-old, so I'll take that one. But I guess you just got to play it based off their maturity level, and what they can take and understand, because you can, tell a kid who's 5 years old, so much information, and they'll say yes, but then it doesn't really, stick with them. So with my son, that's why when our incident, happened at ASU, I don't think it was the right time, because he wouldn't have understood. But now, where he's able to ask questions, he's able to understand what's going on, he's a little bit more mature. Now I can go back to that situation and say, hey, buddy, you remember this time? And then now give more detail and, just explain it to him in better detail. So I guess you just kind of have to play on the maturity level and, what your child can understand and absorb.
I think for younger kids, you kind of give them just little bits and pieces to get them started, and you circle back frequently on the conversation and you slowly build on it. And then as they get older, you can kind of get in depth and actually have some conversations. And I think the important thing is just letting them know that you're always open for questions. Like this conversation is never closed. It's never done. anytime a question comes up, anytime you think of something, you know, we're here, we want to do this together, we want to do this as a family. And I think that's really powerful too.
I think the talk evolves. It's not one and done. It's not like, you know, a sex education thing where, okay, there you go. It's evolved over time. And I feel like it's something that you'll continue to have even into adulthood with different experiences and
all that. Even in sport.
Yeah, for sure.
One thing that we just revealed to our kids this past weekend is that the movie Zootopia, the Disney movie Zootopia, is about racism. And they're like, what? And we're like, no, there's the predators and the prey, and everyone's living in harmony. And all of a sudden there's some people trying to make the predators seem scarier than they are. And a couple of predators, you know, they went savage or whatever, and now everyone's afraid of all the predators. And we're like, that's what we're dealing with right here. And they're like, you know, and that's one of the things. So like, there's a bunch of different ways that kids can kind of start to understand that. Especially, I don't know, many parents don't allow their children to watch the news, but if they happen to see a video or a protest picture or something, and the kid says, you know, what is that? Well, you can, what we've been kind of helping people kind of walk through with their kids, maybe from 5 years old or so, if they happen to see it, so there was a man named George Floyd, and saying his name is very powerful. There was a man named George Floyd, and the police hurt him, and they hurt him until he died. And a lot of people are sad, mad, and angry about it. And I'm feeling, insert your feelings here, about it as well. And that's what's going on. It sparked a lot of conversations, and you know, and so use that as an entree to the rest of the conversation that your child is ready to understand.
Thanks, Eric. That's, you know, that's definitely key. So the Burgess actually have to, you guys have a football game to get to, don't you?
we do.
Oh yeah.
Go Maddox.
I don't want to hold you guys up, but I do want to thank you for coming by and sharing your story.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, it's definitely making an impact right now. I'm 100% sure of it. You know, my people, you know, thanking us already for the help. But again, you know, thanks for coming. You know, hope to see you together or something. And we'll let the kids go crazy. Well, actually, I'll see you Saturday. What am I talking about?
Yeah, there we go.
Jeez,
you know, ask their questions amongst each other too. So
yeah, so that'll be a good time. Well, thanks for coming. I don't want to hold you guys up.
Thanks, Taj.
Thanks so much. You guys take it easy. Go ahead and open it up for more questions to come through Facebook Live comment section. So you guys just go ahead and pump them out. The Baileys, I'm sure you guys okay with time-wise to answer a few more questions?
Yeah.
We're good. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay. Well, actually, I just got a good idea. Eric, would you like to talk about your book while we're feeding in the questions? I'm just gonna go get some questions down, and you know, while you're doing that, I could just go into the comment section and get that going.
Sure thing. So over the course of 2018, I wrote a book called The Cure for Stupidity, using brain science to explain irrational behavior. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm a geek for brain science. I always like to understand why we do the behaviors we do and what's behind them. And it released actually a year ago next week. And it hit #1 on a bunch of Amazon lists, and we're super excited about it. A bunch of people are getting a lot out of it. But the book, it walks through a whole bunch of different topics, from human perception to misperceptions, and the reason that people will debate and fight to be right. And then I've got a big chunk of the book. The largest chapter in the book is on bias. And what happens a lot of times when we want to talk about bias, people misassociate the word bias with racism, because and walls go up because I'm not racist, and if racism is bias, I don't have any bias, right? And so people don't want to talk about it. But that's not exactly how it works. So bias is a systematic error in thinking. That's it. Now, those biases can impact our judgments, can impact our decisions, but bias by itself isn't bad. And so what we want to do is want to help people understand that, yes, I have biases. I mean, if you figure, when you ride on an airplane, do you prefer the aisle seat, middle seat, or window seat? That's a preference. That's what we mean by bias. When you think about, if you're a dog person or a cat person, you have a bias or a preference for one or the other. And that's what all that means. And so when we talk about how we can apply this stuff, instead of looking at people we don't agree with, saying there's something wrong with you, you're an idiot, you're stupid, what we can say is, oh, you're processing the world in your way, and you came to a different conclusion than I did. Now let's figure out how we can understand each other. And that, if we can get to that point, we can change the world.
I mean, that's huge. I've seen so many people going at each other's throats over. I mean, any kind of post. I mean, I feel like 2020, everybody has an opinion, and it's like,
yeah.
If you don't agree with my opinion, then something's wrong with you. You know what I mean? But it's, just like you said, like we need to talk to understand each other more. For me, being a former player, I'm in a locker room with a bunch of different guys. They come from all different walks of life, right? I've had guys that, my white teammates that never had black friends before, right? So, just talking to them, and they're just like, oh man, I never even knew that. Or, you introduce them. So, these are collard greens, man. You ever had any collard greens, or as a ham hock? It's just like, different things. And, it will go ahead and get cultured, through them and them through me as well. But it's all about, having that conversation to see the differences. Comes from how they were raised, or what their background is, on both ways. And like you said, if we could just talk about it, understand each other more, and try to get rid of the bias, like you said, the world would be a better place for sure.
Yeah, and if we can hold our opinions a little looser, right? We have this idea that my way of thinking is the right way of thinking. We hold on to it so tightly because we're certain that it's true. But if we can hold on to the possibility that there might be another way to see the world, that just opens up to listening to someone else's point of view, and that will be transformative as well.
Yeah,
for sure. So I'm getting some more questions in here. All right, let's see here. Is the talk about race different from how? What? Different from how to survive, like example, what to do when you're pulled over. And that's when I was playing with the Rattlers, my good friend Les Skelton, he used to be the head of security, a former highway patrolman with the Phoenix PD here, and he went over every single talk about the obvious things, drugs and guns and stuff like that, but really emphasized the pullover, right? And I feel like this conversation, I mean, it has to be had with all, teenagers of color. And it's unfortunate that we have to go through all these steps. My hands are at 10 and 2. All the windows are down inside my truck. You know what I mean? I'm talking nice, making eye contact. I'm not fidgeting. I'm keeping my hands where they can see them. And it's like all these things. And the conversations, they're important. They're important because, it could save your life one day. And it's unfortunate that we live in a world like that, but, knowledge is power, for sure.
Yeah. So there are many permeations of the talk, and the talk may be how to survive. The talk may be how to make people not feel uncomfortable around you. The talk may be, here's probably what you're going to run into in life. And so there's many different permeations of the talk. But you think about, some people ask, well, what if you didn't have the talk? I mean, are you putting out how your children should be feeling in the situations? I have a few people actually recently ask us, well, are you giving them the association to all of these racist things so they start seeing it in the world? And it's like, well, no. If you consider that people will start dreaming about how they're going to spend their Powerball winnings when they have a 1 in a trillion chance of winning, right? People already are mentally going there of if they, you know, if I win this, I'm gonna quit my job, we're gonna buy this house, this car. Well, research shows that as a Black man in my lifetime, I've got a 1 in 1,000 chance of getting killed by the police. And it's like, wait a minute. So people are willing to kind of mentally rearrange their entire lives on a 1 in a trillion chance of something happening, but then questioning us on preparing ourselves for that 1 in 1,000 chance. And that's kind of what I want to talk about. So no, I don't believe that is going to happen to me, but I am definitely aware that it could.
Correct. So another question here we have: do you guys find the reaction from people in your presence different depending in the U.S.? Like I know when Nicolette and I, walk in certain places, we get more eyes than usual. Locations that you think they're like less concerned about you guys being a biracial couple than others?
That's an interesting question. So we're here living in Arizona, and Arizona, I think Black folks make up about 5% of the population, which is not much.
Yeah.
And so I'm very used to being the only Black person in the room. I'm very, very used to us being the only interracial couple in the room. And when we were first dating, we ran into more situations where we caught a lot of eyeballs, sideways glances, and people keeping distance.
I think before having kids too, it definitely was more difficult for people to accept. And then once we started having kids and they see these beautiful little humans, all around us, it made it easier for people to go, oh wow, they're cute. Kids are really cute, or oh wow, they're a really happy family. And they had these justifications maybe that made it more acceptable to see us when we were with our family. Than when we were by ourselves when we were dating. Those sideways glances, we talked about this earlier with Rudy and Brandi, was about, PDA. It's like, if we give each other a kiss or something, you're getting the looks like, whoa. And in some ways it made us be like, okay, well, let's kiss again. Let's give them something to look at if they want to look at us. But, when we didn't have kids, I do feel like we got a lot more looks than once we started having kids and, being just this beautiful, happy family. That was a lot easier for people to accept than it was just us as individuals together.
Okay, nice. Glad to see things improve for you guys.
Yeah, I think so. I think we made an intentional choice a while ago to be an example for what like pure family love could look like. And so we got 3 kids, and at one point they were all 4 years old and under, so 3 kids in a very short age range. And we travel a lot. She used to work for American Airlines, and so we're flying, kind of pushing all the luggage through the airport with the 3 kids, trying to hold hands. We don't believe in leashes, so we're trying to hold hands or whatever.
It's chaos.
It's pretty chaotic. And
Sure.
So people would say, "Wow, you got your hands full," right? It's just like, haha, I'm making a joke, but really what they're saying is, man, how chaotic could your life be? And so we just decided that we would respond, yes, our hands are full of love. And as soon as we said that, shut it down, shut it right. They're like, huh, and I think that what we want to be is an example that all of the stereotypes you've got might be wrong, and get used to seeing people who have different experiences and accept that they have different experiences and learn from them and grow from them, because that's how we can move this movement forward.
Right. Moving along, we have another question. How do you have the race talk without damaging the trust in the police? I remember, Rudy touched on it a little bit earlier when, we said that, do they think you're a bad guy? Like, how would you go about making sure at the end of the conversation, the police don't end up being the bad guy?
No, that's very important. And I think that, remember, those folks that are trying to take people off the edge of sympathy are trying to say that, what are you saying? All cops are bad? It's like, no, we know that not all cops are bad. We know that. We actually, our business, we do a lot of work with training the Phoenix PD. We do a lot of work with working with firefighters and police officers and executives all over the country. So we know there are a lot of fantastic, I'm going to put my life on the line for you cops. We know that. And so when we have this conversation, what we say is we respect the police. The police have sworn a duty to keep us safe, and we believe that they will. However, it's important to understand that sometimes there may be a police officer who is scared of us just because we're darker than they are, or just because we're Black. And it's important to be aware and make sure that no one has the need to feel scared of us. And it's one of those things, like, unfortunately, we have to have that talk, right? That's a part of the talk. But I think we always kind of wrap it with, we respect the police. The police, a vast majority of police are there to keep us safe. And in these very random situations, it could turn out the other way. So let's protect ourselves against that and still respect the office of the police.
Nice. It's just good information there. So next question. I'm a social worker. Love brain science and Dr. Bruce Perry. I love your passion. Eric, this is for you. I make a lot of mistakes and want to learn to do better to be good. If you have one piece of advice for well-meaning white people, what would that be?
My favorite thing to say to well-meaning white people is make mistakes. Because if you make mistakes, that means you're in the conversation, you're trying. And there's this phrase that I've been telling a lot of folks is the phrase is, I don't know and I don't understand are only powerful if you add on afterwards, but I want to. I don't know, but I want to. I don't understand, but I want to. And stay in that conversation, engage. If you're talking with somebody and you know you're getting in an uncomfortable or touchy situation, say, I'm probably going to say something wrong. I'm probably going to make a mistake. Can you forgive me in advance if I do? Let me know if I do, because I want to be able to learn from that and correct that, and stay engaged in that conversation. Because that is something that a lot of people will refrain from doing is, I'm afraid to make a mistake, so I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to even be in the conversation, which is detrimental to the whole movement. It's detrimental to what you truly want. And that's what I would say.
Yeah, definitely. Just share your love, right? I mean,
yes.
It's not. If you're expressing your love, I don't know how that could be perceived as being anything but love.
Right.
And it's that kind of conversation is hard to go ahead and have. But like you said, it's better to have the conversation than to not have the conversation. Just get a dustpan and get that dirt off the floor. Don't sweep it under the rug. You know what I mean? Things will build up. But if you're willing to go ahead and make a change and try to make a difference by starting off to having that conversation, take that leap. Just take the leap. Okay, so it says here, do you guys have any white friends that have had the talk with their kids? If so, how has their talk been different than your talk?
So two responses. So I just released a video out on Facebook called The Talk. And I basically simulated the last talk that we had with our 12-year-old. And then I kind of broke down some other things to consider. So you can look at that. And before we've done that, most white families, the talk is all about puberty. It's about, here's how your body's going to be changing. And that's the talk. It's the sex talk. And since we've started releasing that, we've actually had a lot of friends come up to us and say, now I'm going to have the talk with my kids and let them know that people are experiencing things that we don't experience. And we want to make sure that we stand up for them. We want to make sure that we protect them. We want to make sure that we make the world better for everybody. We want to make sure we make the world better for them. And so now we see a lot of folks boldly coming in. They maybe showed them the video and they use that as a jumping off point. But really, they're now talking with their kids that racism exists. A lot of times in school, they believe they kind of teach racism as a history subject. It's something that happened in the past, but it exists today. And what these parents are now doing is saying, okay, it exists. You know, your friend Jerem, do you know your friend so-and-so? They've gone through some situations dealing with racist conversations and racist words and racist attitudes. And it's like, really? Oh, and boom, now we've got the start of a conversation, of a dialogue. And that's where that kind of spark happens.
Yeah. And I think for white people, just making sure that it comes from a place of empathy, you know, if it's not something that you've directly experienced, if it's not something that you really know how to have the conversation and give examples personally, you can lean on empathy and just putting yourself in those people's shoes and trying to just understand what other people go through and making sure that your kids learn that empathy from a young age so that they can go ahead and be an advocate and an ally.
That's great advice. That is great advice. Another question here we have: implicit bias is subconscious. How do you teach people to realize they have the bias and have them know they need to try to improve their situation? It's
oh, don't get me started. How much time do we got?
We got a chapter here.
Perfect question for you right there.
No, that's a beautiful question, because yes, implicit bias is something that we can't control, but it's important to understand that they exist. And if you are bold and you are willing to explore yourself and not just talk about it, go to projectimplicit.com. Now, this is a decades-long research study put out by Harvard, where they have a computer program that will measure your bias on like 13 different categories, from like females in science to religion to presidential parties to black, white, race. Yeah, so all these different categories, and they use this study to give you insight to your own biases. Now, based on all that research, they found that 75% of Americans have a bias or preference towards European Americans, a bias against African Americans. Now, I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. I'm a part of that 76%. And people hear that like, wait a minute, Eric, but you're Black. How could you be biased against Black folks? Well, it's not that bias is inherently bad. It's what you choose to do based on those biases. And that's the thing that's really important, is bias exists. We all have biases. Now, what you go and choose to do, that's when things can get bad or good. And so what I want people to do is explore your biases on all possible topics, learn what they are, because once you acknowledge that they exist, instead of hiding from them or pretending that they don't, because they do. It's a fundamental human thing. Once you acknowledge that, now when a situation arises that may challenge that bias, you can then intentionally choose a different behavior. And that's how we overcome these sorts of things. It's really powerful, but first we've got to do the exploration and acknowledge it.
And so like recognizing that you have these biases and educating yourself on, what's really going on is really key. Okay, so, speaking about research and things like that, are there any books or resources to buy for my kids to help with the talk and make sure my home library is diverse? Any books that you recommend for children or even for parents? People out there that, maybe they want to know more about the struggle or the history or, other situations that have happened, just there's some literature for them to help them out.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of really great resources out right now. I know PBS has some, and I'd be more than happy to send you a link. And it has by all age groups broken down for reading lists and topics, and then book recommendations. I don't know them all, based off the age groups for kids. For adults, the two top books right now that are number one and two bestseller on Amazon is White Fragility, and then How to Be an Anti-Racist. And How to Be an Anti-Racist is Ibram X. Kendi is the author, and he actually has a number of books that have been bestsellers that just help you dive into these race conversations. And as uncomfortable as you may be, getting even just buying the book and opening the first page, or doing the audiobook. I know that the audiobooks are available now. Some of the actual books, because they're so popular, they're a little bit of a wait on some of that. But just once you dive into that information, you know, you're opening yourself up to first acknowledge your own, like Eric said, you know, your own biases, and then how do I move forward, you know, through that. So definitely, you know, the top two right now that are completely appropriate with what we're going through is, you know, White Fragility. I don't remember the author's name, but then Ibram X. Kendi, any of his books, if you just go to his author page, there's a whole series of books there. And How to Be an Anti-Racist is, you know, just simply saying, I'm not racist, I'm cool, I checked that box. That's not enough. You know, you can't just say, nope, I'm not racist, I'm okay, I'm good. You have to actually be an anti-racist. You have to actually step up to the plate and call people out when you see something, you know, when you hear an inappropriate joke, or when you see somebody at the gas station, you know, trying to be inappropriate with someone, and, you know, make a comment, or, you know, cut them in line, or whatever the thing may be, calling them out and making sure that you are actually anti-racist. And it could be in your Facebook timeline, like we were talking about, you know, when you're seeing stuff come up that, you know, is something that you would never post, you know, being able to put them on the spot and just call it out from a place of love and a place of, you know what, like that's not going to work. You know, I'm actually taking a stance for racism and saying, nope, no more of that. That's not okay.
Yeah, there's an article from I think it's a couple years ago by Ta-Nehisi Coates and on the Atlantic, and it talks about it's called The Case for Reparations, and what it does is, it's a very, very long article. It's a long essay. They actually have a audio version. It's an hour long, but it goes through one family's experience of living in this world. So it's kind of told kind of through prose, and what happens is you have a perfect explanation of systemic racism. And those are the sorts of experiences that people should be looking for, instead of posting systemic racism doesn't exist because I don't see it, or racism doesn't exist because we've hired a Black president. Like, no, like, these things are still real, and it's important that we understand them. And so reaching out and doing the learning is critically important for keeping the movement going.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Eric, just for one more time, you know, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up the show. We just hit the 7 o'clock marker here. Great job answering the question, guys. You know, I really do appreciate it. You know, the stories that you shared with us and all. Yeah. Thanks for that. Thanks for getting.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having us.
I
really appreciate your time.
Looking forward to it. And Eric, just one more time, we have people asking the question that if you could repeat the name of your book and how they could purchase it.
Here, you go ahead and say it. I'll grab a copy here real quick. So
it's called The Cure for Stupidity. His author page on Amazon is Eric M. Bailey. Very common name, so you got to put the middle initial in there, Eric M. Bailey. And this is the book here.
Nice. Okay,
so we'll see you on Saturday. I'm excited to meet you in person.
It's going to be great. I'm definitely looking forward to it. My whole family is actually, just trying to find T-shirts and things, and
fantastic.
It's going to be a good time. It's going to be.
We're looking forward to it. Thanks so much for your support.
Zoe just came into the frame, but my camera's messed up.
Hi.
Yeah, Eric and Jamie, thank you so much for coming out. Everybody else, thanks for showing. This week we'll be doing a hashtag Norris Jenkins, Markeen Anderson, and Sam Barrington. Okay. Look forward to seeing you guys on Saturday again. And
thanks, Taj.
For coming to another Taj Tuesday.
Bye.
Bye.